Joining us right now, Larry Kudlow from CNBC, host of the Kudlow Report, and of course the Larry Kudlow Show on WMAL Saturdays at 7 p.m. Hello, Larry Kudlow.
Good morning.
Larry Kudlow, you wrote, may I say, a fine article Friday on CNBC.com where you made a brilliant point. And when you make a brilliant point, that, once a year situation, we need to point it out. I'm kidding, of course, but earlier this hour we had Mike Needham. He's from Heritage Action, and he is none too pleased about the Paul Ryan budget deal with Patty Murray in the Senate. But you point out something that I don't think a lot of people have pointed out, and that is the pushback for the sequester budget cuts from defense hawks, from conservative Republicans who were really upset about these sequestration budget cuts. About 40 or 50 Republican votes in the House that would not have supported the sequester level spending being maintained that so many Republican conservative groups are screaming about.
Right. Look, I spoke to several senior House members, okay, no names, but senior House members, and their head count showed that they would be 40 to 50 short if they did a clean CR, which would have held the sequester spending cap levels, okay? And that was always my first choice. My first choice,
of course,
hold the caps. I'm a strong, proponent of it. And I believe it's done a lot of good. We have cut a lot of spending. In fact, if you look at that baseline now, we're back years from where we were in the early days of the Obama administration. So I was all for it from day one. But the votes were never there. The votes were never remotely there. If you want to know the truth, 40 to 50, I may have even been low. I originally thought they'd have to convince, let's say, 15 or 20. But what happened, unfortunately, is not only defense hawks, but just appropriators in general. There's been a pretty big revolt against sequestration. So I think what you have here, and it's going to pass the Senate easily, what you have here is 70% of the sequester survived this. Okay, now Paul Ryan believes that over a period of time they can get it back to 90 or 92%. That remains to be seen. Perhaps yes, perhaps no. But you're getting 70% of the loaf, okay? And I can live with that. There's nothing in there that particularly disturbs me. I worked for a president named Reagan who frequently said, if I get 50% of the loaf, give me half a loaf now, and I'll get the other half later.
There you go. Larry Kudlow and Ronald Reagan, squishy Rhino Republicans.
Well, but, look, I often make this case, and I look, and when I'm one of these guys, I say, look, take the deal. The deal is not a horrible deal. It's not the best deal ever, but it's a lot better than fighting out and potentially having this discussion about closing down the government,
right.
Blah, blah, blah. But I often make this case about Reagan, and I remember, because I was covering the last bit of the Reagan administration from the vantage point of Capitol Hill, and I recall that, he would get about, 60, 70% of what he wanted,
yep.
And he'd cut a deal with Tip O'Neill, and Tip O'Neill would walk away, because it is possible to do this, with about 60 or 70% of what he wanted, because there was overlapping stuff there.
Yeah, more or less. It's funny. I just had dinner with Chris Matthews, but that.
How'd that go?
And you're willing to admit that publicly?
Did he use a napkin or just his tie?
Yes, I am willing to admit that. I may disagree with him politically, but he's a personal friend. Anyway, I will also say this: the politics are very compelling here, and you're pointing them out. The Republican Party, and the reason I called this piece, Ryan is saving the Republicans from themselves. You do not want, if you're a Republican, you do not want a shutdown. You do not want a shutdown for the very simple reason that you have to focus all your energy in the 2014 midterm elections on Obamacare and then economic growth. Obamacare is absolutely vital. Once you go down the shutdown road, you're giving Obama a gift. You are diluting. You are putting Obamacare off the front pages, and instead you're going to battle a shutdown for what amounts to it. You want to know the truth, it's just a couple of bucks. That's all it is, just a couple of bucks.
All right,
and it's not worth it, and that's why Ryan was right, and he negotiated a deal that also takes the Republicans off another hook, and that is that they will never make a deal on anything. And that's important.
They can say, oh, hey, look, we made this deal.
And Ryan showed that deal-making is possible. And as you pointed out, I agree with this. When you make a deal, each side gives a little. Okay, that's the way it works in Washington, and I think this is a turning point. Because I think the Republicans are going to probably take the Senate. But in the next few months, in the next bunch of months, on the debt ceiling and other key pieces of legislation, you are going to see deals, not shutdowns. That's what's going to happen.
Larry Kudlow is our guest, and we only have 1 minute left, but you say everybody gives a little. Here's what I'm missing, because it seems like the Democrats seem thrilled with this deal. What have they given up? What have they lost?
Well, they may seem thrilled, but look, the Democratic Senate budget, first of all, wanted to end the sequester. This budget does no such thing. It keeps 70% of it for the next 2 years. The Democratic original budget wanted $1 trillion in tax hikes, okay? They wanted to close so-called loopholes and have a gigantic tax hike. No such thing happens in this budget. And those are 2 defeats for the Democrats and 2 victories for the Republicans. And also, a third point, unemployment extension, which I think would do damage to a recovering jobs market. The Democrats wanted unemployment extension, insurance extension, and they didn't get it. So if you ask me, they are 0 for 3. They are 0 for 3. And anybody who's ever read any spiritual meditation knows that the key word is progress, not perfection. And that's what you got here in this budget by Ryan. Ryan deserves enormous credit for putting this together.
All right, Larry Kudlow.
Listen, always appreciated, Larry.
Thanks for being here. We will not see you next week because of Christmas, so Merry Christmas to you.
You too.
And
You too.
we'll
Merry
see you in the
Christmas.
new year, Larry Kudlow.
Appreciate it.
All the best.